Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Victoria and today's tutorial we'll be learning how to make a wrap dress with umbrella sleeves and a collar. So this is the fabric I'll be using for this tutorial. It's a crepe fabric and I'll be working with 2.5 yards. So we'll start working on the back piece first, and I'm gonna head to cut out a piece of fabric that I'll be using for the back. So this fabric is on a fold and I used a width of 15 inches, which is a quarter of my hip circumference plus 4 extra inches. And I added that much allowance because I want the lower part to be an A-line. Now for the full length, you go ahead to decide how long or short you want the wrap dress to be. I decided to go with a length of 39 inches, but I'll be adding half an inch to join the flounce because there will be a flounce attached to the end of the skirt. So my total length for this is 39.5 and I just went on to cut out the excess. Now to start creating the back piece, I'll be coming down from the top of my fabric by 1 inch. I'll mark that point across, then square it out with my ruler, and that line will become my shoulder line. And from there, I'll be taking the rest of my measurements, starting with my shoulder to bust measurement at 11 inches. So I'm coming down from the shoulder line by 11 inches and I'm marking that point across. Then I'll go in with my ruler to square it out, and that line will become my bust line. Now the next measurement I'll be taking is my shoulder to waist measurement at 16 inches. So again, I'll be placing my tape from the shoulder line and I'm coming down by 16 inches. I'll mark that point, square it out with my ruler, and that line will become my waistline. Now the next measurement will be my shoulder to hip measurement at 23 inches. So again, coming down from the shoulder line by 23 inches, marking that point across, squaring it out with my ruler, and that will become my hip line. So I already marked and cut out my full length, so I won't be doing that. I'll be moving on to create the back neckline. For the neck width, I'll be working with 4 inches because I plan to attach a collar along the neckline. But if you won't be adding a collar, you can go ahead and use 3.5 for your neck width. So I'm coming in from the center back by 4 inches and I'll mark that point, while for the neck depth, I'm going down by 2 inches, but you can do 1.5. I just don't want mine to be very high neck. So after marking the 2 points, I'll be bringing in my French curve to connect them together. And then I'll go on to mark half of my across shoulder measurement along the shoulder line. So my across shoulder measurement is 16, half of that is 8, so I'm just coming in by 8 inches from the center back, and from that point I'll be going down by 1 inch and I'll be connecting that to meet the neck width in a slant. So I'm bringing in my straight ruler and I'm connecting it like this, and from this point you can go ahead to mark your upper chest line from the end of the shoulder slope. For me, that's 8 inches, so I'm coming down from the end of the shoulder slope by 8 inches. Then I'll go ahead and extend that line. Then I'll also be marking 8 inches just as I marked for half of my across shoulder. This is just to make the line straight when I connect it. So I'll be connecting the upper chest line to meet the end of the shoulder slope in a straight line, and I'm using my straight ruler for this. Now I'll be moving on to mark a quarter of my bust circumference along the upper chest line. This is to help create my armhole. So after marking that, I'll be finding the midpoint of this vertical line, and from there I'll be going in by half an inch before connecting it to meet the end of the shoulder slope and the point I marked on the upper chest line. And I'll be bringing in my French curve to do that. So I'm placing my French curve to touch these 3 points, then I'll draw that out, and there's the armhole. So remember, I marked a quarter of my bust circumference along the upper chest line. I'll just go ahead and add half an inch for ease to that measurement, and then I'll move on to mark the rest of my horizontal measurements. So along the bust line, I'm marking a quarter of my bust circumference, and on the waistline a quarter of my waist circumference, while on the hip line I'm marking a quarter of my hip circumference. After this, I'll go back to add my seam allowances to all these measurements, and for the seam allowance I decided to use 1.5 inches. After marking all these points, I'll go on to connect them together. So I'm bringing in my straight ruler to connect the waistline to the upper chest line. Then I'll be using my free hand to connect the hip line to the waistline. You can also use the pant curve if you have one. And then I'll be connecting the hip line down to meet the hip line. As you can see, I'm connecting it outwards instead of taking it in because I don't want it penciled. Now before I go on to cut out this back piece, I'll first add half an inch allowance along the shoulder slope for joining. And when I'm done with that, I'll go on to cut along the lines I've marked. So I'll be cutting along the neckline, the shoulder slope plus allowance, the armhole and the sides. And that's it for the back piece. Now I'll be moving on to the front. So to create the front piece, here's a fabric I'll be working with, and it's on a fold. And it measures 19 inches, which is 15 inches like I left for the back, plus extra 4 inches for the wrap. So the width of this fabric we'll be using for the front when on a fold is 19 inches. Now I'll be bringing in the back piece we cut out earlier and placing it on the fabric. I'll then go on to mark out the 4 inches that will be used for the wrap. So from the folded end of the fabric, I'm coming in by 4 inches and I'm marking it all the way down. And after this, you can go ahead to draw a straight line to connect the points together. I'm going to skip that part because this fabric is annoying to draw on. So instead, I'll be pinning the back piece following the 4-inch mark. So I'm pinning the center back on the points where I marked the 4 inches. Now when I'm done with that, I'll go on to extend the waistline on the back piece to the fabric below. And then from there, I'll be coming up by 2 inches. I'll go ahead and mark that point and then go on to connect it to the beginning of the shoulder slope. But before I do that, I'll be marking out my neck depth for the front, and I want the front neck depth to be 7 inches deep. And since I already came down from the back by 2 inches, I'll go on to mark down 5 inches. I'll move away the back piece like this and then bring in my ruler to connect all these points together. So I'm connecting the front neck depth to the beginning of the shoulder slope and then to the 2 inches point I marked along the center front. So I started with my ruler and ended up using my free hand because it was easier. So now that I've marked that, I'll be bringing in my scissors to cut along the line. I'll also be cutting along the shoulder slope, the armhole and the sides following the back piece. So I'm basically using the back piece as a guide to cut out these parts for the front. And when I'm all done, I'll be taking away the pins, then I'll remove the back piece and set aside while I continue working on the front piece. So now I'm left with the front piece, and the first thing I'll do is to take the full measurement across the hemline and find the midpoint. I'll go on to mark that point and I'll be moving on to the waistline. So remember, this point here is the waistline I extended, and from there I'll be going down by 3 inches. And what I'll be doing is to connect this point to meet the point I marked on the hemline in a curve. So I'll be using my free hand for this, but you can go ahead and use a punch shaper or whatever tool you prefer. So yeah, after marking, I'll just bring in my scissors to cut following the shape of the curve I made. Then I'll slash open the folded parts, and that's it for the front piece. So I have 2 pieces for the front and 1 piece for the back. I'll go ahead to create a notch along the waistline for the front and back pieces. I forgot to do that earlier. And now it's time to start stitching. So first I'll open up the front pieces and turn it over to the right side and place them on top of each other like this. Then I'll be bringing in the back piece and placing on top of the front pieces, right sides facing each other. I'll go ahead and pin them down along the shoulder slopes. Then I'll take this over to the machine and stitch along the shoulders using a 1/2 inch sewing allowance and also stitch down the sides. So guys, I've done that. I've attached the front pieces to the back along the shoulders and the sides. Now I'll be moving on to work on the sleeves. So for the sleeves, I decided to go with an umbrella sleeves. So I cut out 2 square pieces of fabric that measures 19 inches on all sides. So I'll take away 1 piece and fold this one towards the wrong side like this. So that will be the first folding. I'll go ahead and fold this again a second time, making sure all the sides are equal. Then I'll go on to take the measurement from that folded end to the raw end of the fabric, and when I measured, I had 9.5 inches. So I'll place my tape at that end and measure 9.5 inches all the way till I get to the other end of the fabric. You can see how I'm forming a semicircle as I go. And when I'm done marking, I'll bring in my scissors and cut following the lines I've marked. Now I'm going to open this up so I can fold back again, but this time around I'll be folding in such a way that the top part will be shorter than the bottom part. And I want the difference on this side to be 3 inches, so I'm just measuring to confirm that. After which I'll be bringing in the main piece to measure along the armhole. And when I measured, I had 10 inches. Now I'm going to double that figure because the 10 inches is just one side of the armhole. So the complete round armhole is 20 inches. Now to get the radius of the sleeve opening that will fit into the armhole, I'll be dividing the 20 inches by 6.28, and when I did that I had 3.1 inches, so I just decided to mark 3 inches since the fabric has a little stretch. I'll go ahead to connect the points together and then bring in my scissors to cut following the shape of that curve. And when I open it up, here's what we have. I'll be making a small notch on either side of the folded end. Please do not skip this part, it's important so you know how to place the sleeve on the armhole. So now I'm going to open it up and here's what we have. I'll be matching the notches to the seams I have on the armhole. So now here's the armhole for the main piece. I'll be bringing in the sleeve and I'll be matching the notches to the seam along the shoulder line and the seam along the side. Now when placing the sleeve to the armhole, the longer end of the sleeve should be matched to the shoulder seam, while the shorter end of the sleeve should be matched to the side seam. I know I'm doing the opposite here, but I corrected it afterwards. So you'll be placing the sleeves to the main fabric, right sides facing each other. Go ahead and pin this down, then take this over to the machine and stitch around the armhole using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I went ahead to attach the sleeve to the armhole off camera, and here's what we have. You can see the longer end of the sleeve is along the shoulder line, while the shorter end is along the side seam. So I've turned this over to the wrong side, and the next thing I'm going to do is to measure from the end of the V shape all the way around to the other end, and this measurement will give me an estimate for how long my flounce will be. I'll also go ahead to measure the entire neckline, so I'm starting from the end of the overlap all the way to the back neckline until I get to the other end. And when I measured, I had 46 inches. So I'm doing this because I plan to attach a collar around the neckline, which will also serve as a belt. So I cut out a long piece of fabric that I'll be using for that, which is 5 inches wide, so that when I fold and stitch, I'll be left with 2 inches. Now this is about 1 yard of fabric, and this is the fabric I'll be using to cut out my flounce. So first I folded along the length, and this is the second folding. I'll fold again for the third time and then one last time. So I folded 4 times, and here's what we have. Now from this end with the fold on either side, I'll be coming in by 3 inches. I'll mark that all around and then decide how wide I want my flounce to be. I decided to go with 4.5 inches. I wish I used 5 inches or 5.5 because I would have loved it more if the flounce was a bit wider. So keep in mind, when cutting out the length of your flounce, you should add about 1 to 1.5 inches because you'll be using 1/2 inch to attach it to the dress, and you'll also be hemming the flounce. So now I'm going to be cutting one side open like this, and I'll be left with 4 pieces that I'll be joining off camera to form one long piece. And when I've done that, I'll go ahead to attach the flounce to the dress. So here's the flounce as one long piece. I've attached the 4 pieces together, as you can see. Now I'll place the flounce to the dress, right sides facing each other. I'll take this to the machine and stitch them together using a 1/2 inch sewing allowance. And when I flip it over, this is what it'll look like. So now I'm done attaching the flounce to the dress, and here's what we have. It's slowly coming together. Now it's time to attach the collar to the neckline. So this is the collar. I went on to fuse some interfacing to the wrong side of the collar. I did that off camera. And remember, it's 5 inches wide, making it 2.5 inches when on a fold. Now, because I wanted to make the stitching easier for me, I went on to fold 1/2 inch on either side of the collar, as you can see. I'm going to be placing the right side of the collar to the inside of the dress, which is the wrong side, and I'm starting from the back neckline. I'll go on to pin that down and continue pinning towards the front until I get to the end. Then I'm going to stitch them together on a 1/2 inch sewing allowance, after which I'll flip the collar over to the right side like this, and then make a top stitch on the collar to finish it off. Now remember that this collar also serves as the belt for the dress, so I'll be stitching all the way from one end to another. And after I'm done with the collar, what's left for me to do is to finish off the sleeve and the hemline, and that will be it for this wrap dress. So guys, here's how the dress looks on me. I decided I'll be overlocking the sleeves and the hem because I don't want the flounce to be shorter than it already is. I'm happy with the results. It turned out how I wanted it to be. Now don't forget to leave an opening along the side seam where you'll be passing the belt through. And yeah, we've come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have any questions on this tutorial, leave it in the comment section below, and I'll be seeing you in my next video.